this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? I'm Bud Elliott. This is my summer school series on the Cover 3 College Football Podcast, and today it's NC State. Where do I turn for all my NC State stuff? I go to Pack Pride. That's Cory Smith. He covers it. We've had him on the show a lot of times. It's always been great. Cory, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Currently busy keeping up with everything. Football going on, basketball recruiting going on, and obviously baseball surging right now. So we'll see what the next few weeks hold for us. But yeah, we're trying to lock back into football for you right now.
So last year, this NC State team, it entered the year with some high hopes, and it was, thankfully for NC State fans, my Noles exist. So it was not the biggest flop in the ACC, but it certainly had a bit of a disappointing year. What's kind of the tone around this program as Dave Doeren attempts a bit of a reset?
Yeah, the tone right now is you got to figure things out. On the offensive end of the football, they've kept a lot of the guys from last year that were able to, give some optimism down the stretch last year. But on the defensive side of the football, there's a lot to figure out right now. And I think, the expectations are this team has got to be able to compete to, first of all, get a winning record this upcoming year. I think 7-5, if you get a couple wins that you would like to have, is probably the expectation. But 8-4, 9-3 isn't out of the realm of possibilities. And I think that's more of what NC State fans are hoping for coming off of what's happened the last couple years.
What are you expecting to see from this offense now as Kurt Roper takes over?
You'd like to say, it's going to be fast paced. It's going to be, what Kurt Roper talked about when he was at Duke, over a decade ago. But you've seen, when other coaches kind of put their fingerprints on this offense, it's changed it a little bit. So I'm wondering how much Dave Doeren is going to allow him to really open things up and be the offensive coordinator he wants to be. But he's got the pieces there. This offense has C.J. Bailey coming back. It's the first quarterback to return to NC State since Devin Leary several years back. So you've had transfer quarterbacks come in for, 1 year and not materialize. They finally find somebody in C.J. Bailey that's coming back that has the arm talent, has the, is able to be mobile in the pocket. And so you have all those things that you really want. You also have a major weapon for him in Justin Jolie at the tight end position. And that's somebody that they're relying on from coming back last year. That was a deep downfield threat for them, despite being the tight end position. It felt like average 25 yards per catch, but obviously those are not the numbers he actually ended up with. But you have him, you have Noah Rogers coming back. You also have several other wide receivers, Wesley Grimes, Terrell Anderson, some guys that were younger last year that you're hoping can make that next jump. And then at the running back position, obviously having Hollywood Smothers coming back, and they feel really good about a young guy in Duke Scott too. So all those guys coming back from last year, you're hoping that they can make that next leap. And then, obviously Kurt Roper taking over, clearly they had some confidence in him to be able to take this offense over too.
If you had to pick a leading receiver and a leading running back for this team, who are you picking and what's your confidence level in those picks?
Yeah, the lead running back is obvious. Hollywood Smothers is that guy, I feel like, going into this year. And then Kendrick Raphael transferring out, going to Cal, obviously opens that opportunity up even more for him. And that's something that Dave Doeren's been reluctant to do over the years. He hasn't had, a guy that he's been like, oh, this is my bell cow back. He's gone with more of a three-headed system. Duke's got, like I said, a young player, but we haven't seen him on the field to this point. So there's been a lot of optimism coming out of spring camp that he would be able to push and be that second running back. And obviously, like I said, Raphael transferring out opens up more opportunities for him. But Hollywood Smothers, the lead guy there. As far as receiver, am I allowed to cheat and go tight end here and say Justin Jolie?
I think we'll allow it.
Okay, because I'm going to say Justin Jolie is the lead receiver. He was the leading receiver for them last year. 661 yards wasn't a huge number, but he was the guy when it came to being that reliable receiver for NC State. He was, I believe, second in terms of catch or receptions for NC State last year. If I had to go with an actual receiver, I would say Noah Rogers. Noah Rogers finished second in terms of receiving yards last year. A lot of that was just on big play ability. I think they're going to go a little bit more to him this coming up season. And allow him to be that guy that you recruited him to be. Obviously, the Ohio State transfer and a guy that was seen as a 5-star, fringe 5-star coming out of Rollsville here locally. So they really feel like he's going to be the guy that needs to take that next step this year.
Offensive line wise, what is the chance that this thing can get back on track?
Yeah, you bring back a couple pieces from last year. Jacarius Peak, obviously being the big one for NC State. He was playing right tackle all last season. They expect him to move over to left tackle. Teague Anderson, that comes over from Utah State, is a guy that we've heard a lot about and was recruited to be that right tackle for them. He's a multi-year starter at Utah State and expected to be that guy. Graded out really well on PFF numbers last year. The question mark is going to be kind of in the middle of this offensive line. Anthony Carter Jr. comes back. He had a bounce back year last year. Was one of his best years that he's had at the college level. So him playing left guard or right guard, we don't know exactly yet, but I think he'll probably move to that left guard spot and play alongside Jacarius Peak. The right guard is going to be the question mark. There's a few guys that they brought in. They brought in one from Purdue this past year. They expect to be potentially the guy in Jalen Grant. They've also brought over Brock Stukes that came over from NCA&T. Don't know exactly if he's going to be the center there or not. But one guy to watch for is going to be that came in from the recruiting class this past year. Actually, he would be a true freshman. But Spike Souls is somebody to watch for at that center spot. Was a fast riser late in the class. I believe ended up being top 100 overall. So he's the top recruited, top overall offensive line recruit during the Dave Doran era. And he happens to be a center. So, the thought process was we don't usually push guys up highly at the center spot for 24/7 just because it's a very niche position.
Right.
But he was able to earn that given what he did at the All-American, at the Navy All-American Bowl.
So we probably should have discussed this earlier in the interview, but I have so many questions about other spots in this team, and the one that feels a little more rock solid is quarterback CJ Bailey. Where can he take the leap this year? And he obviously showed a lot of promise last year as a freshman.
Yeah, the biggest area where he can take a leap is really just being more comfortable in the pocket. I think you look at what Kurt Roper does. Obviously, Kurt Roper has been the guy leading the quarterbacks for a number of years now at this point. I previously was with the running backs, but he's been leading the quarterbacks for years now. And I think, we saw a lot from CJ Bailey in terms of, off-platform throws, being able to be mobile in the pocket, and, having some chemistry with a lot of the receivers that he had on the team. Didn't really have a ton of chemistry with Kevin Concepcion. And obviously that, ended up leading to him transferring out, going to Texas A&M. So that is a, one spot where you're missing somebody at the slot receiver position. But I think really for him, it's just being more comfortable in the pocket and being able to hit some of those deep downfield passes on a more consistent basis. So, and again, relying on some other guys like a Noah Rogers and then, Wesley Grimes, who emerges as that number 2 wide receiver for him going into the season, because there needs to be multiple weapons for him to be able to thrive. And I think taking a little bit more of those checkdowns, because we know how explosive Hollywood Smothers can be. So yes, he grew a lot late in the season, and that obviously gives NC State some optimism heading into the season. But you'd like to see him get a little more comfortable in this offense and be that guy that can drop back and just beat you with his arm as opposed to having to fall on his legs at times.
All right, let's hit a break here. On the flip side, we're going to discuss NC State's defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, y'all, welcome back in Summer School NC State edition here on the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. Corey, this defense last year took a major step back, and now they have a new coordinator. They have in DJ Elliott. They have a lot of different personnel. It's going to look different. Is it possible for you to parse out what is going to look different due to DJ and what is going to look different due to personnel changes?
Yeah, I think you're gonna still keep some of those base 3-3-5 concepts simply because of the fact that that's what you've recruited to for the last 5 years under Tony Gibson before he left and went to Marshall. So they're going to keep some of those concepts, but they're looking to move to some of the 3-4 as well. So you'd go to 3-4-4 or 3. Yeah, I'm blanking on the numbers here. But yeah, you go to 3, a little bit more 3-4, which basically gives you a stand-up edge rusher. So they've recruited a little bit more towards that. So you've got guys that you feel good about. Like I said, Trey Thomas earlier in the podcast talked a little bit about him, but Trey Thomas is somebody that comes over for, actually, we may have been talking about it before the podcast. Trey Thomas comes over from Temple. He's been somebody that we've heard a little bit about in the spring, to be a little bit of that edge rusher. But the question mark right now is going to be, do you have the defensive line to run a 3-3-5? Because you lose Davin Vann from last year, who was just a major part of what NC State did in terms of, being on the edge for you to be that pass rusher. Travali Price is somebody that the expectations were high for last year, didn't really step up as much as people thought this past season. And then Brandon Cleveland is somebody in the middle of this defense that was really good this past year, but the depth behind him doesn't look as great after you lose some guys there. So I think that's going to be the big question mark is, can this defensive line be good enough to still continue to run this 3-3-5 and really eat up some of the opportunities to not allow guys to get to the second level against this linebacker core?
If this defense does bounce back, who's somebody else who you think is like a key reason why?
Yeah, I mean, a key reason why I think, potentially Caden Fordham. If Caden Fordham, makes that leap that they were expecting last year before the injury, didn't really, become that guy early on in the season for them. So he really needs to make that leap. And another guy that I think that we've heard a ton about throughout the offseason, J.J. Johnson at the safety spot. They lost a lot when it comes to the secondary, losing guys like Brandon Cisse, losing Tamarcus Cooley that they didn't expect to lose this offseason. They really needed somebody to step up when it comes to the safety position. You bring over J.J. Johnson, a guy that was, all conference at Georgia State previously. He comes over to NC State, only has 1 year left to prove himself. A little undersized for the safety position, but somebody that they really need to lean on going into this offseason. And because they're missing a lot at the safety position right now. They're trying to recruit still as we're speaking, trying to add some more depth there. So I think he's somebody that really needs to step up. And like I said, Caden Fordham at the linebacker position. There's a couple guys that, if you have some guys that can be great edge rushers, could help you there. Like I said, Trey Thomas, again, I keep bringing up, but they really need somebody to be that kind of pass rusher to make this 3-4 system potentially work if you have that stand-up edge.
This schedule is not crazy hard, but it's not like the easiest thing in the world, I guess. And part of that is that we don't really know what Duke's going to be or what the Hokies will be, what FSU will be. Probably don't know what Carolina is going to be. At least to my mind, I think we have some certainty kind of like what like Miami, Georgia Tech, and the Irish will be. What's your expectation for this team this year, and how would you define success for the Wolfpack in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is you look at the schedule and it's like there's not, a ton of like easily winnable games. Your thought process going into the year is like, all right, well, on the schedule, is there a team that you're like, all right, 3 or 4 teams, you're like, all right, you get those wins, and then now you need 2 or 3 more to get to bowl eligibility. Well, East Carolina is a team that, going into the season, you would have thought like, all right, well, NC State should be leaps and bounds ahead of them. Well, you just lost the bowl game to them to end the season. One of the non-conference games is Virginia, who's actually been doing really well in the transfer portal here recently. Are they a team that makes a leap in this upcoming season? Because they really need to in order to keep that regime together. Wake Forest is the first ACC game. You do that. That's not a great team, but you're going on the road, which has been a house of horrors for NC State over the years. Yeah. Duke is the same way. Like you said, Duke is not a team that is just going to roll over against NC State. And they've got some pieces, obviously bringing in an elite quarterback that they feel really good about, clearly paying a lot of money to get a quarterback there too. So, and that's, again, 2 of those first 4 games being on the road. It's not an easy start to the schedule for NC State. And then, going to Notre Dame, going to Pittsburgh, going to Miami, Florida State, we don't know where they're going to be. So I think the expectation for NC State right now is, get to a winning, obviously you'd like to get to 7-5, like I said earlier in the podcast, but, they really need to, I think, in order to to keep Dave Doran where he is right now and to keep this team, on the trajectory that it wants to be, to kind of get back to, all right, next season can be the season. I feel like you need to get to at least 8-4, and one of those wins be, a notable one. I mean, obviously, winning on the road at Notre Dame is not going to be easy. Winning on the road at Miami is not going to be easy. But if you can find a way to win one of those games or a Pittsburgh and then close the season with a win over Florida State and UNC, like that might be enough to be able to push things into the offseason. Yet again, that's kind of what Dave's been able to do over the last couple of years. It's not been great football. It's not been, great optics overall, but they've been able to finish strong. And it's like, all right, we can't give up on this because there is something to build towards this offseason. CJ Bailey, Hollywood Smothers were those pieces this past offseason. Can they do that again late in the season for NC State again?
Love it. Cory, I really enjoyed this thing, man. We'll see you soon.
Yes, sir. Have a good one, bud.